agenda will be reviewing for our final exam, which will take place when? Next week, next Wednesday. But the way we will do today's activities, first I will talk about the new information, which will be part of the test. Then we'll have group presentations. Then we will review a comprehensive review of material we covered in the second half of the course. And that would be where I'll be taking the final exam from. You have to be aware that the final exam, there won't be any multiple choice questions on it. You'll be required to think in order to answer each and every question that will be on the test. Any questions so far? Anybody has a question? How many questions on the test? I knew it. All right, I can tell you very confidently that there will be between 1 and 100 questions on the test. Okay, it will fall somewhere between there. Any other questions? None?
Will it be on the second half of stuff we've done or the first half?
Okay, let me ask someone in this room. Do you think the test will be in the second half of the course or the first half of the course? No. Based on what I said in my introduction.
No, the whole thing.
What do you mean the whole thing?
Second half or the whole semester?
Okay, let me repeat. Well, the final exam will be coming from the second half of the semester or the whole semester? The second half. And how do you know this? Because I just said it. Right? Absolutely did. Okay? All right. So these are all from the second half of the course. There is nothing in this about what?
Balance of power.
Balance of power, national interest, security dilemma.
Cold War.
The Cold War. Exactly. What's the Cold War, by the way?
They put it back to school.
Right. You sort of mirroring what a student once said. It was cold. And by the way, according to current events in the world now, you think we're easing back into a Cold War-like situation?
We're going back into a world war.
We're going back into a world war. Say more. Say more about that.
No.
Back into a world war, why? Involving whom? Where will it start? In Europe. Why? Russia. Okay. We'll just have to wait and see. But I thought things like world wars and so on were over. Haven't we progressed to become more civilized as humans? That we should not want to kill 150 million people again? No, we haven't? Okay. All right. So we shall see. We shall see. Let's hope the people who are involved in this crisis involving Ukraine hope they play their cards correctly so we don't get into a situation like that. All right. New information. Centered around the United Nations, right? How it works, where it's located. So let's start with its location. First of all, where is the United Nations headquarters?
New York. Did you say Netherlands?
Huh?
England.
Okay, say that again.
I think it's in New York.
It's in New York City. It's a very tall building, the United Nations building with all of the flags pretty much of the member nations of the world. You've seen that building on TV, right? Lots of flags, right? Okay, that's the United Nations headquarters in New York City. All right. The United Nations is tasked with certain functions. example, the United Nations undertakes peacekeeping functions. What's peacekeeping? What do we mean by that? No? To keep the peace, right? Exactly. So if there is a conflict going on someplace, and it is escalated to some point, or it has escalated to war, and after the war, to keep the two sides apart, the United Nations will send in peacekeeping troops. And they have certain ROEs. I'm going to write that down. ROE. What do you think that is? Rules of engagement. Rules of engagement. Right? What are these soldiers about to do? Well, they should not be involved in the shooting. They're there to keep the peace. But as with anything else, sometimes a situation presents itself and they have no choice but to defend themselves. I recall in Somalia in the 1990s, do you remember this whole idea around Black Hawk Down, that movie? All right. So some Pakistani soldiers were there keeping the peace. And some local people, it could have been Al-Qaeda, they shot and killed about 22 Pakistani soldiers. So what is a country supposed to do under conditions like those? Well, they went ahead and they retaliated and pretty much shot whoever they thought was responsible. And that usually ends up missing the real target. But that was a response to what happened to them. So rules of engagement. Rules, right? Now, countries around the world have a responsibility to protect any population that is being targeted for war crimes, things like genocide, right? If a country or a leader is targeting a certain group to wipe them out, it is the responsibility of the rest of the world to stop that leader from doing that. So pretty much what Putin is doing now in Ukraine is cause for concern, right? Everybody is saying, let's stop him from doing it. Well, how are you going to stop him from doing it? No one is talking about bombing him. We're talking about putting sanctions on him. So far, the sanctions that are on him are not really bothering him. In his mindset right now, because what is he doing? He's kind of playing this balance of power idea. We don't want the West to come too close to Russia's doorstep to have influence, okay? So he is pretty much trying to consolidate Russia's position as a leader in the world. But by doing so, it seems he has to try and control the people around him. It started with Crimea, and now even today, there's some security people. They're not calling themselves Russian soldiers, but they have been going all over eastern Ukraine and taking over buildings. Okay? just today, some Ukrainians decide they will stand up to them. But when the security guys came in, the Ukrainians stood down. So you have to ask yourself, what is really happening there? They're not fighting back. So if they're not fighting back, it's going to make it easy for Russia to go ahead and annex these places. And when Russia does, it's going to cause a lot of blowback, if you want to call this, or lashing out from the West. They will try to increase the sanctions, and if Russia perceives itself as being under pressure, they will probably go and take more territory. So this thing doesn't look as if it's going anywhere really good. Okay? All right. Responsibility to protect, same idea as collective security. Collective security, countries come together to stop the aggression of a particular country. You will recall when Saddam Hussein of Iraq invaded Kuwait. George Herbert Walker Bush, the father, was able to get a coalition of countries to come and help with the mission to kick Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. And that happened, right? Now, let's talk some more specifics about the United Nations in a structural sense. The person who is in charge of the United Nations is called the Secretary General. The United Nations Secretary General. Okay? Does anyone know who the Secretary General is of the United Nations? Okay. Lucas, who's the Secretary General of the United Nations? You thinking about it?
I don't want to guess.
You don't want to guess? So Nolly, who's that? Martini, who's that? No. Anybody knows? All right. This is his name. Mr. Moon. He was dressed in eclipse to tonight's group, right? Ban Ki-moon. Ban Ki-moon is from South Korea. Right? Usually the Secretary General of the United Nations is someone from a country other than the top 5. Okay? I'll explain the top 5 in a moment. All right. You remember Kofi Annan, the one before him? The guy from Africa? Or you guys weren't thinking about international relations 5 years ago, 4 years ago? Okay. All right. That's okay. So there is the United Nations Security Council. You have to hear about this. Very important part of the United Nations. So when there is a problem somewhere, like for example, Syria or Libya or wherever, the Security Council meets to talk about what should we do about this situation, right? So the next thing I'm going to tell you about is the membership of the United Nations Security Council. The United Nations Security Council consists of 15 member states. 15. Right? Of the 15, 5 of those members are permanent. They never move. We can talk about the fairness of that. But 5 are permanent, and 10 rotate every 2 years. Okay? 5 permanent, that's known as the P5, right here, the P5, permanent 5. And 10 rotate every 2 years. So every 2 years, what does that mean? A different 10 comes in, right? But these 5 are permanent, they never move. Now tell me what you're thinking when you hear that 5 are permanent. Biggest? Okay, we'll find out. We'll find out. But how fair is that? Sound like a democracy to you? But they vote. Voting goes on in the United Nations Security Council. All right. You will like this part. Let's leave this out for a moment. P5 plus 1. All right. And talk about who these 5 are. Now let me get your best guess. Whom do you think these are?
US, Russia,
US, Russia, China,
France.
France, England. All right, good job. These are the 5. Permanent.
Oh, we're right. We were right.
If you said US, Russia, China, France, and England, you were right. All right, so anyway, you guys recall when we talked about Bretton Woods, when we were talking about Bretton Woods 1944 and the financial and trading system that was set up? These guys were there. After a major conflict like the World War, the world has to be reset, right? According to a new order. And somebody has to be responsible for determining what the new world order is. But usually it's the people who won. Okay? They'll determine what the world will look like afterwards. So it shouldn't be surprising to you that the reserve currency of the world became what? US dollars. After World War II, it was strong. Okay? And so anyway, these members, each one of them has what is known as veto power. Veto power.
The 5, right?
Only the 5. Each one has veto power. Any idea as to what veto power is? Julian, you know.
Yeah, they can basically, like, I guess, vote against
Yes.
something.
They can vote against something. They can vote if they can override it. That's veto. Throw it out. Okay? So let's get behind what this really means. And then you tell me what you think. Okay? A resolution comes to the United Nations Security Council. Some country will bring a resolution, like France and England did, when we were talking about getting rid of Gaddafi out of Libya. Right? So resolution comes, the council votes. If one country of the 5 says, I don't agree with this, if the council votes to go to war, the one says, no. That means it does not happen. They vetoed it. Alright? Resolution comes to the council, again brought by England and France. Assad must go. Who said those famous words? Obama. Has Assad gone yet?
Nope.
No. Is he going?
Nope.
Okay. Alright. So the resolution came to the council because Assad is using chemical weapons against his own people. Right? So Assad must go. The council votes on the resolution. to kick Assad out. However they're going to decide to do that, that has to be worked out. But if the council says Assad has to go, then the countries will get together, take military action or economic sanctions, whatever they decide on. So as you know, Assad is still there. Why? Because somebody vetoed that resolution. Which one of these five do you think did that? Why would Russia do that? It's in their interest. They have interest in Syria. You see how this works? Over the years, several resolutions have come to the council against something that Israel has done. Does Israel get punished? Why not? You see? So how is this looking to you now? It's a waste of time?
It is.
It is a waste of time? It's inefficient, right? So
things get through like week or anything.
things can get through, you know. They were still able to bomb Gaddafi. The United States actually started the bombing. And how was that possible? Because Russia did not veto it. China did not veto it. They abstained from voting. You see? If you say, I'm not voting, then the others can vote for it. You see what I mean? So they did not vote for it. They probably did not want to be in a position to say, we are supporting the bad guy Gaddafi. It wasn't too much of an interest to them. They abstained. But I'll tell you what happened before. The Korean War probably would not have happened. But Russia had a problem with the other members of the council over the inclusion of Belarus in some event, okay, that Russia would not agree with. So the day when the vote was supposed to happen, to go to Korea to fight, Russia did not show up. They were absent. So they could not veto it. And we had the Korean War. And from that day on, guess what? Russia is never absent again. They probably show up first to the meeting. Okay? It shows you how volatile this thing could be. We can talk about the fairness or unfairness of it. It doesn't look to be a fair system. Then you ask yourself, what about these other countries in the world? They don't have a say. And what about the other 10? They vote all the time. But who cares when one of the 5 could veto a resolution? Lucas, I want you to sit up. Sir, there you go. All right. Now, you should be thinking, I know you are, you're just not saying it. What about countries that are emerging now as world players, right? Like Brazil and India. Actually, they have expressed their interest in having a seat under P5. Because now, let's say the economies have surpassed those of France and England, right? They want the respect. They think they're world players enough to be able to be included. But guess what the procedure is to let that happen? Someone has to bring a resolution to the council and say, let's take out England and put in Brazil. Right? You get the picture?
So it only could be.
And you get the picture? Someone has to bring a resolution to the council to say, let's replace France with India. But what is going to happen in a case like that? France will veto it, or England will veto it. So what kind of world do we have if some countries are locked out from ascending to that place? Tell me how that situation will change. Give me your best idea as to how this situation can change. Take on who can do it? You have to have a resolution to take that.
The other players in P5.
Who?
The other players in P5. If you're going to take out one, then the only other ones that are as strong as the player in P5 would be the other ones.
Yes, so how are you going to take them out? You have to bring, it has to be done by law. So somebody first has to bring a resolution and everybody has to vote on it.
With the merging nations as well.
Oh. So how are you going to do it? It's not legal to do that.
Make a P6 or a P7.
They what?
Add like 2 spots.
Oh yes, well that's the most reasonable thing, right? Make it like a P6 or a P8. But the P5, it'll be a little too crowded in there, right? Yeah, so that's what happened. You know what would probably change that situation? A new world order, right? You have another world war, and at the end of that, you have to create a new world order. And if some of these become the losers, they're out. Yes. But no one is going to voluntarily say, okay, I like Brazil, so let me just step down and put Brazil in my place. That most likely is not going to happen, right? This is a kind of a situation that's kind of interesting. Other countries want to have this spot. Now, P5 plus 1. What is that? Germany. Germany is the 1, the plus 1, okay?
Right now?
Yes. But Germany has that spot because Germany is now ready to be a player and is friendly with all these guys, okay? And Germany is the #1 economy in Europe. So it's almost like a payback for helping out situation. Because Germany, during the recession, right? They have spent a whole lot of money trying to bail out different countries in Europe. They get to sit there, but they do not have veto power. Only the 5 have veto power. Okay? And of course the General Assembly, these are the other members in the United Nations. Right? Of the approximately 200 countries in the world, 5 permanent members of the United Nations Security Council. 10 rotate every 2 years, so pretty much everyone gets a chance to serve in the United Nations Security Council. Well, what is that going to do for you? Tell me. It's good for your resume, right?
If the vote of the 10 countries doesn't matter, why do they even vote?
They get to say. In fact, it's said that the United Nations, generally speaking, is a place where people go to talk. The United Nations has no power. Whatever it gets is what the other member countries contribute. So countries have to pay dues. What's dues? D-U-E-S.
Money they pay.
Right. An annual fee that you pay to be a member. Like you are in an organization, you have to pay fees. Okay? What organization are you in that you pay a fee to be a part of it?
Multiple, but that's not my question.
Multiple organizations.
Yes, listen. So who exactly are the people who attend the General Assembly? Are they prime ministers, presidents, secretaries
Yes,
of state?
and prime ministers, heads of states.
So do
Or anyone that is designated.
Okay, but if it doesn't really do anything, what would be the point of a president going there?
It's good. Every year, we have the heads of government meeting. Okay? They all come up at the top. And Gaddafi, when he used to come to the United Nations after the sanctions were lifted off him, after he gave up his nuclear program, right? He came to the United Nations and he would talk for 90 minutes and supposedly no one understood what he was saying. That's just American journalists saying that, okay? Fidel Castro used to come to the United Nations. And he famously used to like to visit Harlem in New York. Yes, Harlem. You see?
Why?
Why? Harlem is rich in culture. It was a Harlem Renaissance. Castro probably used to have some fun there in his younger days. Have you heard that he lived in Harlem?
I don't know him personally, so I can't.
No, you don't. Yeah, I'm serious. Right? So anyway, he used to come, all the leaders come. North Korea has their representatives over there. And they say what they have to say against the United States and England and the rest of it. It's the United Nations. But the United States has the ability to restrict someone from coming in. And they will argue, you remember we talked about persona non grata? For example, right now, the United States will not allow the Iranian representative to the United Nations to get a visa to come to the United States to work. Because supposedly he was one of the students that took over the US Embassy in Tehran, Iran in 1979. So that's going on, that's some kind of diplomatic row that's happening. The United States will not allow him to get a visa to come to the United States, to work at the United Nations. You first have to come to the United States, then go to the United Nations. Okay? All ambassadors, if they come to work at their embassies, where would their embassies be located in the first place?
DC.
Washington, D.C., right? So if all of them come to work at the embassies, first they have to come to the United States, right? Then they can work at the embassy. Right? The United States can bar someone from coming to the United States. And once they're in the embassy, the United States can't touch them if they're in the embassy. Right? But they have to come in the United States soil first, go to the airport and take a taxi, whatever, a limo, helicopter, whatever it is, to go to the embassy. All right. Any questions so far? You got a question?
Is the P5 plus 1 a new thing, or do they change the plus 1 every so often?
No.
Just for Germany?
That's the first plus one. Been around for maybe 5 years, probably.
Can the 10 proposal?
The 10 proposes, the 10 propose things all the time. But if the one of the 5 decide that's not what they want, it doesn't happen. Okay? I'm going to do that in this class. I'm going to choose a P5 in here. Yeah, I need a drink, right? So you veto me, right? I give you an F and you say, nah.